My name is Bernice, and at 67 years old, I thought I knew what family meant. After 3 long years of barely hearing from my son David, I decided to surprise him with a visit to his beautiful home in Ohio. I packed my bags with such excitement, imagining warm hugs, shared meals, and precious time with my grandchildren. The drive from Arizona felt endless, but my heart was full of hope. I pictured cozy evenings catching up on lost time, helping with dinner, maybe even reading bedtime stories to Emma and Jake. What I discovered instead would test everything I believed about unconditional love and teach me the hardest lesson about respect. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that will touch your heart. You will not believe how this family visit turned out and what I discovered about my own strength. I arrived at David's house on a crisp Friday afternoon in late October. The 2-story colonial sat perfectly on its corner lot with manicured lawns, stretching like green carpets and a white picket fence that seemed straight out of a magazine. Rose bushes lined the walkway, their last blooms of the season adding splashes of pink against the autumn backdrop. This was the American dream I had worked so hard to give my son the foundation for. When David opened the front door, my smile faltered. Instead of the warm embrace I had imagined during those long highway miles, he offered only a brief, awkward hug. His eyes darted past me to the street as if checking whether the neighbors were watching. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, and something in his tone made my stomach clench. Before I could answer, Sandra appeared behind him. My daughter-in-law wore a perfectly pressed blouse and designer jeans, her blonde hair swept into an effortless bun. "Bernice," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. What a surprise. The word surprise carried the weight of an unwelcome interruption. Emma and Jake came running down the hallway, their faces lighting up when they saw me. "Grandma Bernice!" 12-year-old Emma called out, but as she moved toward me for a hug, Sandra placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Children remember your manners," she said sharply. 8-year-old Jake hung back suddenly shy, sensing the tension that crackled through the air like electricity before a storm. I tried to bridge the awkward moment with enthusiasm. "I brought presents for everyone," I said, reaching into my purse for the small gifts I had carefully selected. "And, Emma, I have those books you mentioned loving when we talked on the phone last Christmas." But Sandra was already ushering the children away from the door. "We were not really expecting you to stay this long," David said, running his hand through his hair in a gesture I remembered from his childhood whenever he was uncomfortable. The statement hit me like cold water. I had driven over 1,000 miles, and he was already thinking about when I would leave. "We have our routines, you understand." Sandra added, her voice carrying that particular tone women use when they want to sound reasonable while being anything but. "The children have soccer practice, piano lessons, homework schedules. It's all very structured." Standing in their beautiful foyer, surrounded by family photos that notably excluded me, I felt like an intruder in my own son's life. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers and expensive furniture, filled rooms that seemed designed more for showing than living. Everything was perfect, cold, and unwelcoming. Dinner that evening was an exercise in polite torture. Sandra had prepared what she called a simple family meal, but served it on china that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. She kept glancing at her watch between bites, as if timing how long this obligation would last. The children, usually chatty and curious, had been coached into quiet politeness. David avoided making eye contact with me, instead discussing his work at the insurance company with the detached interest of someone making small talk with a stranger. When I tried to share stories about my life in Arizona, my volunteer work at the animal shelter, or the watercolor classes I had started taking, the conversation died quick deaths. Sandra would smile and nod, then immediately redirect attention back to their busy, important lives. "Tomorrow we have the Johnson's barbecue," Sandra announced as she cleared the plates. "And Sunday is church, then Emma's friend's birthday party." Every activity seemed designed to exclude me, a grandmother-shaped obstacle in their carefully planned weekend. As the evening wore on and no mention was made of where I would sleep, anxiety began creeping up my spine. I had assumed I would stay in their guest room, or perhaps on the comfortable-looking sofa in their living room. When I finally asked about sleeping arrangements, David and Sandra exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "This is where you will be staying," David said, leading me through the back door and across the yard toward a structure I had noticed earlier but assumed was storage. The old barn stood about 50 feet behind the main house, its weathered wood siding gray with age and neglect. As David pushed open the heavy door, the smell hit me first. Musty hay, old wood, and the lingering scent of animals that had occupied this space decades ago. A single bare bulb hung from a beam, casting harsh shadows that made the space feel more like a prison cell than a guest room. "Are you serious, David?" The words came out before I could stop them. In the dim light, I could see he had made minimal preparations. An old camping mattress lay on the floor, covered with what appeared to be a sleeping bag from his high school camping trips. A card table held a plastic pitcher of water and a towel that had seen better days. "It's just temporary," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The house is full." But I knew their house. 4 bedrooms, including a guest room that Sandra used for her craft projects. Full was not the issue. Respect was. Sandra appeared in the doorway but did not step inside. She wrapped her arms around herself as if the barn's atmosphere might contaminate her. "I hope you'll be comfortable," she said in a tone that suggested she hoped no such thing. "There's an extra blanket in the corner if you get cold." After they left, closing the barn door behind them with a finality that echoed in the empty space, I stood alone in the dim light. Through the small window, I could see their house glowing warmly in the distance. I could hear the faint sounds of laughter, the television playing normal family life continuing without me. The first night was the longest of my life. The October air was crisp, and the barn offered little insulation. The thin mattress did nothing to cushion the hard floor, and every time I shifted, the sleeping bag crackled like wrapping paper. I lay there listening to my own breathing and fighting back tears that wanted to fall. As I stared at the rough wooden beams above me, memories flooded back. I remembered David at 5 years old crawling into my bed during thunderstorms. I remembered working double shifts as a nurse to pay for his college tuition, selling my beloved 1965 Mustang to cover his final semester when financial aid fell short. I remembered the pride in his voice when he called to tell me about his promotion, his engagement, the birth of his children. When had I become someone to be hidden away like an embarrassment? When had my love become something to be endured rather than celebrated? Saturday morning brought Sandra to the barn with breakfast, a paper plate holding a piece of toast and a small container of orange juice that tasted like it had been mixed from powder. "I hope you slept well," she said with that practiced smile. She was dressed for her day, yoga pants and a designer athletic top that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Thank you," I managed, accepting the meager offering. As she turned to leave, I caught her checking her phone. Through the barn window, I watched her walk back to the house, her pace quickening as if she could not get away fast enough. From my position in the barn, I had a perfect view of the kitchen window. I watched Sandra move around her beautiful kitchen, preparing what looked like a full breakfast spread. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee drifted across the yard, making my single piece of toast feel even more insulting. Later that morning, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. Sandra was standing near the kitchen window phone pressed to her ear, clearly visible from the barn. Her voice carried across the quiet yard. "When is she leaving?" Sandra was saying to whoever was on the other end. "This is so embarrassing. David's mother just showed up and expects us to drop everything. She's staying in the barn, so hopefully she'll get the hint and leave soon." My hands clenched into fists. The barn. They were discussing me like I was a stray animal they were trying to discourage from returning. Through the window, I saw David join Sandra in the kitchen. Their conversation was animated, filled with gestures toward the barn. "She'll get the hint soon enough," I heard David say as he moved closer to the window. His voice carried the same dismissive tone he might use discussing an unwanted solicitor. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but it was joined by something else. A cold, calculating anger that I had not felt since I was a young mother protecting my child from bullies. If they wanted to play games, I could play too. But I had decades of experience they had not counted on. For the next 3 days, I became a student of my son's household. Every slight, every whispered conversation, every moment of casual cruelty was cataloged in my mind with the precision of someone who had spent 30 years as a nurse trained to observe and remember details. I discovered that David was living well beyond his means. On Monday morning, I watched through the barn window as he signed papers for a new BMW in the driveway, Sandra practically bouncing with excitement as she ran her hands along the pearl-white exterior. The salesman's clipboard and the stack of financing documents told a story of monthly payments that had to be straining their budget. Sandra's spending habits became clear as delivery trucks arrived daily. Amazon packages, specialty food deliveries, boxes from department stores I recognized as expensive. I watched her tear open packages like a child on Christmas morning, often discarding items that did not meet her expectations into closets that must have been overflowing with impulse purchases. During my meals of leftover bread and whatever Sandra deemed acceptable for the barn dweller, I observed her throwing away food that was perfectly fresh. Whole meals went into the garbage while I was given stale rolls and instant soup mixed with lukewarm water. On Tuesday afternoon, my granddaughter Emma appeared at the barn door when her parents were occupied with phone calls. Her eyes were wide with the confusion that children feel when adult behavior makes no sense. "Grandma, why are you sleeping here?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Mommy said you like barns, but this seems cold and scary." I knelt down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that are hard to understand, sweetheart. But I want you to know that I love you very much, no matter where I sleep." "I wanted to show you my new art project," she whispered, glancing toward the house. "But Mommy said I shouldn't bother you because you're probably tired from being old." The casual cruelty of using my age as an excuse to separate me from my grandchildren was breathtaking. Before I could respond, Sandra's voice cut across the yard. "Emma, get away from there right now." I watched my granddaughter's face crumple with confusion as she was pulled back toward the house. Sandra did not even glance in my direction, as if acknowledging me might somehow validate my existence. That evening, I heard 8-year-old Jake crying in his room. His window faced the barn, and in the quiet of the night, his sobs carried clearly. I pressed my face against the barn window and saw him looking out toward me, his small hands pressed against the glass. When Sandra appeared in his room to close the curtains blocking his view, my heart broke a little more. Wednesday brought the conversation that sealed my resolve. Sandra was in the backyard thinking herself safely out of earshot as she talked on her phone with someone she clearly considered a confidant. "You should see her," Sandra laughed, her voice carrying across the yard with crystal clarity. "We put the old lady in the barn and she's actually staying there. I thought for sure she would throw a fit and leave by now, but she's more pathetic than I imagined. David says she has no choice because she doesn't have money for a hotel." The person on the other end must have said something funny because Sandra's laughter became even more animated. "I know, right? Who shows up uninvited and expects to be treated like royalty. She's probably hoping David will inherit something when she dies, but honestly, what could she possibly have? She lives in some little apartment in Arizona." As I listened to my son's wife mock my financial situation and dismiss my worth as a human being, I felt something click into place. The hurt was still there, but it was now accompanied by a cold, clear purpose. They thought they knew me. They thought I was just a weak old woman with nowhere else to go and nothing to offer. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. That night, I called my attorney in Arizona. Robert Patterson had handled my legal affairs since my husband died, and his voice was warm with genuine concern when I explained where I was staying and why. "Bernice, that's unconscionable," he said after I finished describing my treatment. "You don't have to tolerate that. You have options." "Tell me about my will, Robert," I said quietly. "Specifically, tell me about David's inheritance." There was a pause as he pulled up my file. "Your house is valued at approximately $800,000 given the recent real estate boom in Arizona. The life insurance policy is worth another $200,000 and your retirement accounts total about $300,000. David stands to inherit just over $1.3 million. And if I wanted to make changes, you're of sound mind, and the will is entirely your decision. Changes can be made at any time." After ending the call, I sat in the cold barn and felt something I had not experienced in days. Power. My son thought he was teaching me a lesson about knowing my place. Instead, he was about to learn about consequences. I called my niece Lisa in California. She was the daughter of my sister who had died too young, and we had maintained a close relationship over the years. When I explained my situation, Her voice rose with indignation. "Aunt Bernice, that's horrible. Come stay with us immediately. The kids would love to see you, and you know you're always welcome here." "I will soon," I promised. "But first, I have something I need to take care of." Lisa had always been like another daughter to me, especially after her mother died. She was a teacher, married to a good man, raising 3 children with the kind of values I had tried to instill in David. She deserved a secure future, and I was about to make sure she got it. Thursday morning, I contacted a real estate agent in Arizona and instructed her to prepare the paperwork to transfer ownership of my house to Lisa immediately, rather than waiting for my death. The agent was confused but professional, agreeing to have the papers ready by the following week. I also called the insurance company and changed my beneficiaries. Every policy, every retirement account, every investment I had carefully built over decades of hard work was redirected away from David and toward Lisa and her children. As I made these calls from the cold barn using my cell phone, because asking to use their house phone was apparently beyond what my son's hospitality could accommodate, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. For the first time since arriving, I was not the victim of this situation. I was taking control. That afternoon, I watched Sandra throw away a perfectly good casserole because she had apparently burned the edges. The waste was staggering, especially when contrasted with the bread crusts and lukewarm soup that constituted my meals. I took photos with my phone, documenting everything. Sunday morning arrived with an unseasonable warmth that felt like a sign. As I folded the thin blanket that had provided little comfort over the past week, I could hear the sounds of the family preparing for church through the barn walls. Normal family sounds: running water, closing doors, the bustle of people getting ready for their day. I walked to the house and knocked on the back door. David answered, already dressed in his Sunday best, looking irritated by the interruption. "I will be leaving today," I announced simply. The relief that washed over his face was immediate and unmistakable. "Oh, good. I mean, it was great to see you, Mom, but we have a busy day planned." Sandra appeared behind him, practically glowing with satisfaction. "Safe travels, Bernice. Thanks for understanding about our space situation." "Before I go," I said calmly, "I need to speak with David privately." Sandra looked like she wanted to object, but David nodded and led me into their formal living room. The space was magazine perfect, all white furniture and glass coffee tables that clearly were not meant for actual living. I reached into my purse and withdrew an envelope I had prepared the night before. The letter inside had been written by hand, every word carefully chosen. "I want you to read this after I leave," I told him, placing the sealed envelope on their pristine coffee table. "Not before. After." David picked up the envelope, weighing it in his hands. "What is it?" "A letter from your mother," I said simply. "The mother who raised you alone after your father died when you were 10. The mother who worked double shifts to pay for your education. The mother who sold her prized Mustang to cover your final semester of college. The mother you put in a barn?" For the first time since my arrival, David looked uncomfortable. Some flicker of the boy I had raised seemed to surface in his eyes. "Mom, read it after I leave," I repeated firmly. Then I walked to the foyer where Emma and Jake were putting on their church shoes. I knelt down and hugged each of them, holding on just a moment longer than normal. "Remember that Grandma loves you both very much," I whispered. "And remember that family means treating each other with kindness and respect." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Will we see you again, Grandma?" "We will see," I said, kissing the top of her head. "But know that you can always call me if you need me." Sandra appeared quickly, clearly wanting to end this emotional scene. "Come on, children. We need to get going, or we will be late for church." The irony was not lost on me. I called a taxi from my cell phone and waited on the front steps with my small suitcase. As the yellow cab pulled into their perfect driveway, Sandra practically pushed the children toward their own car as if my leaving needed to be expedited before the neighbors noticed. David stood in the doorway, still holding the envelope. For a moment, I thought I saw uncertainty cross his face, but Sandra's hand on his back seemed to remind him of his priorities. "Goodbye, son," I said from the taxi window. The letter I left behind contained everything I had observed, documented, and decided during my week in their barn. It read, "David, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Not just from your house, but from your inheritance. The house in Arizona, worth $800,000, now belongs to Lisa. The life insurance policies worth $200,000 now list her children as beneficiaries. The retirement accounts worth $300,000 will help pay for their college educations. You chose to put your mother in a barn like an unwanted animal. You chose to humiliate the woman who sacrificed everything for your future. You chose to teach your children that elderly family members are burdens to be hidden away rather than treasures to be cherished. I choose to give my estate to someone who understands the value of family. The photos I have taken and the recordings I have made of Sandra's conversations about the old lady in the barn will serve as documentation should you attempt to contest this decision. Your wife's comments about my being pathetic and having no money were particularly enlightening. Respect is earned, not inherited. You chose to show me none. I choose to leave my legacy with someone who will honor it. Your mother, for the last time, Bernice. 6 months have passed since I left Ohio, and my life has been transformed in ways I could never have imagined. Lisa welcomed me into her family with open arms, giving me the guest room that overlooks her beautiful garden. Her children, aged 14, 12, and 9, call me Grandma Bernie and include me in every family activity, from homework, help to weekend camping trips. I have thrown myself into new adventures with the energy of someone who has been given a second chance at happiness. My volunteer work at the local animal shelter has expanded into fostering senior dogs that need special care. These old animals, often overlooked by potential adopters, understand something about being discarded that resonates deeply with me. Together, we are healing. The watercolor classes I started in Arizona have continued here in California, and I have discovered a talent for capturing landscapes that I never knew I possessed. Lisa has hung several of my paintings in her home, displaying them with the pride that David never showed for anything I had accomplished. My health has improved dramatically since leaving that cold barn. The respiratory issues I developed from sleeping in the damp, poorly ventilated space have cleared up completely. My arthritis, exacerbated by sleeping on a thin mattress on a concrete floor, has become manageable again with proper rest and the warmth of a real home. 2 months after I left Ohio, David called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was stammering and desperate. Mom, we need to talk. I read your letter. I had no idea you felt. We were just trying to. Please call me back. We can work this out. I did not call back immediately. Instead, I waited 3 days and sent a simple text message. Respect is earned, inherited. His responses became increasingly frantic. Sandra, apparently realizing the financial implications of my decision, began sending messages through social media, alternating between anger and attempts at reconciliation. You can't just cut off your own son, one message read. Think about the children. I thought about the children constantly. I thought about Emma asking why I was in the barn and Jake crying at his window and Sandra pulling them away from me as if my presence might contaminate them. I thought about what lessons they were learning about how to treat family members who become inconvenient. My final communication to David was a letter written on beautiful stationery and mailed to arrive on his birthday. David, I think about you every day just as I have since the moment you were born. I remember the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during storms and the young man who called me crying when he was overwhelmed by college. I remember being so proud when you graduated, got your first job. Sandra became a father. What I cannot understand is when you decided that the woman who gave you life, who sacrificed her dreams for yours, who loved you unconditionally for 42 years, deserved to sleep in a barn while strangers were welcome in your guest room. The money you have lost was never really yours. It was the fruit of my labor, my sacrifices, my careful planning for the future. I have given it to someone who sees me as a blessing rather than a burden. If you want a relationship with me, it cannot be built on the foundation of inheritance expectations. It must be built on love, respect, and genuine desire for my presence in your life. The barn made it clear that these things were absent. I am not angry anymore. I am not hurt anymore. I am free. Free from the obligation to accept poor treatment because we share blood. Free to choose my family based on how they choose to treat me. The door is not permanently closed, but it will only open when you can honestly say that you want me in your life for who I am, not what I might leave behind. With hope for your growth, your mother. Lisa found me crying when I finished writing that letter, not from sadness, but from a sense of completion. "Are you okay, Aunt Bernie?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me with the natural affection I had missed so desperately. "I am more than okay," I told her. "I am exactly where I belong." As I sit here today, surrounded by the laughter of children who see me as a treasure rather than a burden, I have learned profound lessons about the nature of family and self-worth that I want to share with you. Family is not determined by blood alone. It is determined by love, respect, and the choice to treat each other with dignity. Lisa and her family chose me just as much as I chose them. We built something beautiful together based on mutual affection rather than obligation. I learned that I had been accepting poor treatment for years, making excuses for David's distance and Sandra's coldness because I thought that was what mothers were supposed to do. I thought unconditional love meant accepting any behavior without consequences. I was wrong. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional acceptance of disrespect. Setting boundaries, even painful ones, sometimes becomes necessary to preserve your own dignity and self-worth. The barn was a blessing in disguise because it showed me exactly how my son viewed my worth. Without that stark, undeniable demonstration, I might have continued making excuses and accepting crumbs of affection while giving my whole heart. I also learned that it is never too late to start over. At 67, I thought my story was mostly written. Instead, I discovered that I was simply beginning a new chapter. The senior dogs I foster have taught me that being older does not mean being less valuable. We all deserve love and comfort in our final years. My days now are filled with purpose and joy. I help Lisa with her children, sharing stories and wisdom while learning new things from their young perspectives. I paint landscapes that capture the beauty I see around me. I volunteer with animals who need second chances, just like I did. Most importantly, I wake up every day in a home where I am wanted, valued, and loved. The contrast between the cold barn and my warm bedroom in Lisa's house reminds me daily that I made the right choice. David and I exchange Christmas cards now. Brief, polite correspondence that acknowledges our relationship without the previous expectations. He has never apologized for the barn, which tells me he still does not understand what he did wrong. But I have stopped waiting for apologies and started living for joy. Sandra never contacts me directly, though I hear through mutual acquaintances that my decision to change my will has caused significant stress in their marriage. The financial planning they had built around inheriting my estate has crumbled, and they have had to drastically reduce their spending. The BMW was repossessed 6 months ago. My grandchildren, Emma and Jake, send me drawings and letters, occasionally always with notes at the bottom from Sandra or David, clearly monitoring their communication. But in those childish drawings of flowers and rainbows, I see love that their parents tried to extinguish but could not completely kill. I send them birthday gifts and Christmas presents, always with notes that emphasize how much I love them and how proud I am of their accomplishments. I hope that someday, when they are adults, they will understand that their grandmother did not abandon them, but rather chose to surround herself with people who appreciated her presence. Blood does not guarantee love, but love can create the strongest bonds of all. The family who loves you might not be the one you were born into, but the one who chooses to cherish you exactly as you are. I want everyone listening to understand that you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of your age or circumstances. Do not accept barn treatment from anyone, even family members who think they can get away with it because they assume you have nowhere else to go. You always have choices, even when they seem impossible to see. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to walk away from situations that diminish your worth. I learned that wisdom and strength do not decrease with age. In fact, the experiences that come with living 67 years gave me the tools I needed to handle this situation with grace and power. I knew how to research, how to plan, how to make difficult decisions based on principles rather than emotions. Most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to choose happiness over obligation, joy over duty, and love over mere blood relation. Before we part ways today, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever felt like you were being taken for granted by family members who should treasure you? Have you found yourself making excuses for poor treatment because you think that is what love requires? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own family situations, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more real life stories that explore the complicated relationships we navigate. Share this story with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment, regardless of their age or circumstances. Thank you for listening to my journey from that cold barn in Ohio to the warm, loving home I have found here in California. Remember that your worth is not determined by how others choose to treat you, but by how you choose to value yourself. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away from people who cannot see your value and find those who can. May you always remember that family is about love, respect, and choice, not just blood. And may you never, ever accept barn treatment from anyone who claims to care about you. Until next time, choose love, choose respect, and choose yourself when necessary. You deserve nothing less.